If you haven't checked the previous video, please do. This video won't make sense otherwise.
So, we left off on Pastor desperately grasping for some sort of relationship with Jacob, bad or good, and her having a completely obsessive crush on Jacob, which she actually admitted to. After many attempts, we were finally able to get Pastor off of Jacob's back, but not before sending him another DM several days later.
And of course, using guilt trip tactics as usual. I think we got a clear picture now that Pasta obviously has several common themes surrounding her. The self-deprecation, suicide and self-harm threats, constant trauma dumping. And we're still only at 2020. We haven't even reached 2023 yet, never mind 2021.
Pasta has done so much shit that I even had to make a whole extra section, which will be linked on all parts of the video, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this is when the trolling started.
Originally, it was just me and Jacob trolling Pasta. We would pretend to break up and act like we had the most horrid relationship ever, pretending that one of us cheated, pretending that one of us was using the other, or that one of us was just very abusive to the other.
When in reality, we were laughing in
DMS and constantly sending ecother screenshots. Our relationship was perfectly fine. I admit it was somewhat
rocky, but nowhere near the image we
had painted for Pasta. The reason we did all of that was just so we could gain sympathy from Pasta using a fake sob story,
only to completely raid her server when one of us got CEO owner.
This is another fucked up thing we did. Yeah, we might have been 13-year-old children looking for revenge, but we obviously knew better at that age.
We were pretty messed up and thought this was the best way to deal with Pasta's mistreatment.
We continued to do horrendous shit to Pasta, like raiding her server a bunch and just being assholes in general. While all of this was going down, I had mentioned to both of my friends about Pasta's behavior, so they were aware of her. But if I am being honest, dragging them into this whole mess was the worst mistake I've ever made.
To anyone who found out about Pasta through me and got dragged into this situation because of it, I'm so sorry. I should never been as selfish as I was back then and caused you the amount of pain I did, all because I wanted petty revenge. I know that I was young, but I still fucked up bad. I know I did. I don't think I can ever fully forgive myself for making as big of a mess as I did back then. A lot of people got fucked up bad because of this, and I can only really blame myself for that.
I let my anger take the wheel for me, and I just stopped caring about everything, including my friends, and that's not right. Not even a little bit. So, because my friends were being told about everything Pasta was doing at the time, they wanted her to feel hurt as well, even the people who hadn't even met her yet.
And so we planned a raid so we could all attack her at the same time.
We all joined a GC to plan for the raid, in which I would basically let Mike here, aka Comics sends Undertale the Skeleton, and my other friend spam message, and I would give Jacob CEO owner and just let him destroy everything while I watched.
Pasta yet again had to create a new server, where Mikey started to become more involved with Pasta. Mikey had a plan that he would pretty much play along and pretend to like Pasta, and as soon as he gained her trust he would send us a link, so we could raid her again. I don't even remember if his plan worked or not, but according to him it did somewhat work. Just not exactly the way he expected, which Mikey will explain in part 3.
Turns out Mikey didn't even need to do any of that, because Jacob had already joined in with another out and had already raided the server again.
Even though all this stuff continued, that doesn't mean I didn't feel any remorse back then. I did have moments where I felt like I should have stopped.
But obviously, that didn't happen. At some point, me and a bunch of other people who hated Pasta joined a now deleted server. What's main purpose wasn't originally meant for Pasta's harassment, but it ended up being used for that anyway, but not all the time.
And Pasta broke up with her two partners.
I'm not sure when it became two, but she did end up coming out as poly and dating them both. She left them in favor for someone entirely new. All thought we would find out that this relationship was much more sinister than we'd first imagined. This part is no fault of Pasta's. She was an actual victim in this situation, and it's legitimately fucked up.
But to cut it short, Snowy, Pasta's partner, was actually 16 years old when dating Pasta. Keep in mind that it's still 2020, so Pasta is still 12 years old in this situation.
We didn't notice at first, since I don't think any of us cared enough about their relationship at the time to know about the age gap, but once we noticed, it was the first time everyone on all sides unanimously agreed on something, which is that this relationship is fucked up.
Meanwhile, I had just lost contact with Mikey for the first time because of the pasta situation.
Mikey started to get tired of me and Jacob constantly talking about pasta to the point where he lashed out at Jacob, and it caused a huge fight in Mikey's server. So this is where things start becoming really foggy, because I was extremely stressed out at around late 2020, early 2021. So bear with me if I get a lot of information wrong.
And I'm also missing a lot of evidence here too.
So after we found out that Pasta was dating a pedo, we decided to inform as much people as we could and get them to convince Pasta to stop dating Snowy. But Pasta wouldn't listen. In fact, Pasta
Was so in denial about Snowy being a pedophile that when it was all over, she still didn't believe it besides the obvious
proof, which is kinda sad. Snowy also ended up grooming a beloved friend of ours 2 years later, and Pasta's response to this was to completely break this person's boundaries. Mikey will also be explaining this on his part. It doesn't help that Pasta allows this person in her server, which is full of minors, but we're getting a bit off topic now.
So, since Pasta wouldn't listen to our concerns about Snowy, we ended up raiding her server with her ex's help, which honestly, looking back, it was most likely more of an attack on Pasta than on Snowy. I did end up using the DOC to not only expose Snowy, but to expose Pasta's skeletons in her closet as well.
Like when she would drop a word of several minors, including myself.
So it seems like adding that information in affected it a bit. Pasta again had to create a new server after the raid, which was highly protected because of the accusations against Snowy. After that happened, Snowy threatened to kill herself after being exposed as a pedophile, and ended up doing it.
Is what I would have said if Snowy actually did it, because it turns out Snowy faked it to get out of being called a pedophile, and they made it very obvious it was fake because their story was all over the place. Yet somehow Pasta and many others fell for it. They even had me fooled for a second, but we very quickly realized it was fake once we pieced together all the evidence. But anyways, Pasta broke up with Snowy after she died and got together with another person.
Finally though, things were starting to calm down again, and I just decided to befriend Pasta without any tricks up my sleeve this time.
I was looking for a genuine friendship. Too bad that friendship didn't last long, because I found out Pasta was fat shaming me behind my back, and also sending people my YouTube to just attack me. And this time my friendship with Pasta ended for a while for once.
So we're not gonna be hearing from her again until a little later. I tried to be friends with Mikey too, but our friendship ended up only lasting 2 days.
I still hated his guts during this time, but also missed our friendship. I had mixed feelings and didn't even know if I wanted to be his friend again yet. I left his server after finding older messages where they shit-talked about me, which made me want to leave Mikey again.
But before I could block Mikey, he found older messages of me from when he first blocked me, which was me, Jacob, and our ex-friend all shit-talking and misgendering him. Also, if you don't think misgendering is that big of a deal, go fuck yourself.
It's not cool or funny and actually hurts trans people in so many ways. I wouldn't be seeing Mikey for a while after that either. Fun fact, I mentioned karma way early on back when we were first harassing Pasta. And now seeing this means my suspicions came true, because now I was being treated exactly how I treated others. Karma is real, y'all. So, this is another part where I don't have much evidence and have horrible memory. But I'm gonna try and remember as much as I can. Basically, what happened was me and the other people I was in the server with, the one mentioned before, found a really old dead server that Pasta made, and Pasta just so happened to be in that server. I think the owner of that server was harassing Pasta because they wanted to be in her server. But Pasta obviously didn't want that because they had been harassing Pasta along with the rest of us. But they persisted anyway. I'm not gonna talk too much about that person or mention them by name for the sake of the people I care about. But if you know, you know.
So we did. Well, like 2 people of this server, now that I really think about it, started to harass Pasta as always.
But Pasta wasn't having it this time. She was done with people harassing her. So, in a state of pure anger and sadness, Pasta leaked her location and phone number. And seeing that put genuine fear and shock into me. As terrible of a person I was back then, I still knew that this was totally wrong and that we'd gone too far this time. But apparently, the owner didn't think we went far enough and started spreading Pasta's phone number on places on the internet which contained a lot of people. The goal was to get as many people to call Pasta as possible. Jacob actually contributed to it as well, And honestly, if I had to pick a moment where I felt the most disgusted with Jacob, it was definitely that one.
I think I actually felt all the love for him just leave my body in that moment.
I ended up expressing to Jacob that I was sickened watching him do that. It was just straight up wrong to even think about doing that in the first place. Thankfully, it wasn't hard to convince him to stop, so he stopped.
I had him help me try to take damage control, and we convinced the owner to stop.
But I think a few people started to call her. Hopefully it wasn't too much.
Thinking about this stuff makes me feel weird inside. At the time, my mind was basically screaming at me how wrong this was, and how we've taken it too far.
So after this whole situation, I finally started to slowly pull myself away from pasta, and tried to get others to do the same, including Jacob. It wasn't easy at first trying to get everyone to leave pasta, and the owner as well, since they caused the most chaos. It seemed like shit-talking and harassing pasta just became part of our routine, but eventually, the hate started to die down a bit.
I think we became frenemies with pasta either during the spring months or in summer.
We would still cause hurt sometimes to her,
but I don't think it was anything beyond being extremely annoying. I can't remember if we were friends for a long period of time or if it was on and off.
but I do remember pasta making her current server, being invited to it, and then being kicked out cause we said something pasta didn't like. I forgot what it was. Some of us did rejoin her server on alts, either to be annoying or just to be there, but after a while we just stopped caring, and finally just let pasta have peace.
We were finally done with our harassment of pasta. But then Pasta and her ex and Mikey made an exposed DOC on Jacob.
They had assumed someone who was harassing Pasta was actually Jacob and my ex-friend, but mainly though it was Jacob. But in reality, it was someone completely different.
Her name is Wilma. There were 2 DOCs made, one by Pasta and the other by our ex-friend, who we had now left for good due to entirely different issues. For Pasta's DOC, they mostly included older screenshots from 2020 and screenshots that were sent by Wilma instead of by Jacob.
They must thought they were the same person or something. My ex-friend's DOC actually proved Jacob had nothing to do with it, and also more evidence that proves that Pasta was still being weird at that time. The DOC will be in the extras DOC linked in the description.
Me and Jacob just did nothing and ended up making a joke DOC to make fun of Pasta and her friend's terrible job at trying to expose Jacob.
The video they made was taken down, and we wouldn't be focusing on Pasta again until all the way in summer of 2022, as a completely changed person. I was the only one who came back this time, and I was no longer the stalker, the harasser or Pasta's bully.
I was just a friend of hers now.
I ended up managing to reconcile with Mikey again, and even made a full apology to both him and Pasta, which they both accepted. But of course, the moment I decided to come back was the moment I got dragged into another drama. You'll remember that cultural appropriation drama?
With a certain someone who won't be named since they cried last time. I mentioned them by name.
Yeah, if you remember, I made a shitty video on that. I hate that video so much. Looking at it or thinking about it makes me want to die. So to sum it up, somebody made an OC that was culturally inaccurate, and Pasta had a problem with that, since it was her culture in question. But it caused a massive cat fight, and now that I hate Ecother. Pasta kept talking about the drama, and I hadn't even been friends with her for a day yet, and I was already sick of her talking about it.
It kinda reminded me of my 2021 self when I would still talk about Pasta nonstop.
Then, she ended up breaking up with one of her partners. She had 2. The breakup was very ugly, and the other person became friends with Pasta's ex, and now the ex hates Pasta. Then, some other random dude just started harassing Pasta for no reason.
The reason they gave was because they hated kids or something, and so they kept targeting Pasta for months on end.
Then some stuff happened with Pasta and her friend, who won't be named, and I ended up being dragged in the middle of that as well. I actually ended up finding out the Pasta was extremely disrespectful to her friends, thanks to a few people, who also won't be named, who actually complained to me, and felt like Pasta didn't care about them, or that were just annoyed with Pasta's behavior towards them.
I don't blame these people for being afraid to come out about their situations, because Pasta's very hard to confront whenever you feel like she's done something wrong.
She usually just resorts to getting mad at the person, or just hating herself for it, instead of actually fixing the problem. I also found out Pasta was still making sexual content of her Sona, well, mascot now, which is obviously weird because Pasta is 15 years old now. I say mascot because her mascot and Sona look exactly like the same person, with minor changes.
You can barely tell them apart besides hairstyle, eye color and their outfits.
I feel like the mascot argument would only actually work if the mascot didn't look exactly like her persona.
Pastor was still also faking DID and self-diagnosed with DID, and it's not like I have a problem with self-diagnosis. The way that Pastor treats her self-diagnosis is weird.
Self-diagnosis is only really meant to be an assumption, while Pastor acts like this is a full-blown fact.
A lot of my friends do self-diagnose with a bunch of things. They never state it like it's completely true, because they know and understand that self-diagnosis is not the same as a regular one.
Not to mention that Pastor's autos tend to switch very fast, like several seconds from Ecotha. And from what I've heard, that shouldn't even be possible in DID.
My hatred for Pastor started to build up again, and after that I left, because there was no point in being friends with someone who doesn't even respect yours or others' concerns about them, and basically treats us like dolls.
So yeah, that's my part of the video finally wrapped up. Thank you to those who chose to hear me out, even if I did cause a lot of horrible stuff to happen. TLDR,
Pastor never changed.
she's just more subtle about her behavior.
Stop believing her.
Okay, bye.